Ethan Voss never imagined that humanity's future would depend on a game of chess. He sat in a grand alien courtroom, staring across the long stone table at Queen Xelvera, ruler of the Zyrian Empire. She was tall, almost 7 feet, with deep violet skin and piercing golden eyes that studied him with curiosity. A crown of dark metal sat on her head, and she wore ceremonial armor that shimmered under the artificial lights of the chamber. Behind her, towering Zyrian warriors stood like statues, their heavy weapons strapped to their backs. They looked at Ethan with silent judgment, as if they could not believe their queen would waste time on such a fragile-looking creature. Ethan wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a chess grandmaster, and somehow he had been thrown into the strangest match of his life. A Zyrian official, dressed in flowing red robes, stepped forward. He raised a hand, calling for silence. By the will of Queen Xelvera, the fate of this negotiation shall be decided by a single game of strategy, the official announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. If the human champion wins, our empire will form an alliance with Earth. If he loses, the official hesitated, glancing at the queen. Ethan swallowed hard. He already knew the answer. If he loses, Xelvera said smoothly, her voice both elegant and commanding, he shall marry me. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Some of the Zyrian warriors smirked. Others remained cold and unreadable. Ethan sat frozen, his mind racing. This is a joke, right? He finally said. The queen tilted her head. Do I appear to be joking, human? Ethan glanced at the chessboard that had been set between them. The pieces were carved from some kind of polished black and silver stone, shaped in a slightly alien style, but still recognizable. The board itself was large, almost too big for a normal human table, but perfectly suited for the queen's long fingers. He exhaled slowly. Why chess? Because war is wasteful, Xelvera said simply. The Zyrian Empire respects strength, but strength is not only in battle. It is in the mind. It is in strategy. She leaned forward slightly. Your people wish for peace, but I will not ally my empire with a species that does not think. Ethan understood. This wasn't just about the game. It was a test. She wanted to see if humanity was worthy. Still, the stakes were insane. If he lost, he wouldn't just disappoint Earth. He would become the queen's husband. How is that fair? He blurted out. Why marriage? The queen's lips curled into a small, bemused smile. Because, human, the Zyrian way is to take the strongest as mates. If you defeat me in a game of intellect, then you prove yourself to be the strongest mind in this room. The room filled with the sound of quiet laughter from the Zyrian warriors. They did not believe Ethan stood a chance. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't like the chess tournaments he had played on Earth. He wasn't facing a human opponent. He was up against a queen of an alien empire, someone who had likely studied strategy in ways he had never even imagined. He could walk away. He could refuse. But that would be the same as surrender. Earth's leaders had placed their trust in him. The fate of humanity's relationship with the Zyrian Empire rested in his hands. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a fighter. But he knew one thing. He never backed down from a challenge. He took a deep breath and met Xelvera's golden eyes. I accept. A spark of interest flickered across the queen's face. Good. The official clapped his hands, and 2 Zyrian attendants stepped forward. One of them placed a small black sphere in front of the queen, while the other placed a silver one in front of Ethan. Xelvera picked up the black sphere and pressed her thumb against it. The sphere glowed softly, then dissolved into dust. She had chosen black. Ethan would go first. He picked up the silver sphere. It was cool and smooth in his hand. The moment he pressed his thumb against it, the sphere glowed for a second before crumbling away like ash. The game had begun. A strange silence filled the room as the pieces stood ready on the board. The air was thick with tension. Ethan placed his fingers on the first pawn and made his move. As soon as he did, the queen smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "I have been waiting for this." Ethan's stomach twisted, but he kept his face calm. He had faced some of the greatest chess minds on earth, but something told him that Queen Excelvera was unlike any opponent he had ever met. And the game had just begun. Ethan Voss knew how to control his nerves. He had played in world championships, under bright lights, with cameras watching his every move. But this was different. The room was too quiet. Dozens of Xerian warriors stood around the stone table, their sharp golden eyes fixed on the chessboard. Their queen, Excelvera, sat across from Ethan, completely calm. She had an air of supreme confidence, like someone who had already won. Ethan forced himself to focus. He had the white pieces, which meant he would make the first move. He reached out and moved his pawn to e4, a strong opening, aggressive but controlled. Excelvera watched without blinking. Then, with smooth precision, she mirrored his move, pushing her own pawn forward. Ethan felt a chill. She's playing this seriously. Somehow, that made it worse. This wasn't just a game for her. She wasn't just moving pieces. Every move had meaning. Every decision was a test. He had to stay sharp, the mind of a warrior. A few more moves passed, and Ethan recognized the Sicilian defense, one of the most complex openings in chess. It was a sign of deep strategic thinking, used by grandmasters who preferred long-term advantages over quick victories. She's playing a human strategy. That realization made his heart beat faster. She wasn't just relying on raw intelligence. She had studied human chess, which meant she had prepared for him. He exhaled slowly. All right, fine. Let's see how deep this goes. He adjusted his strategy, choosing a variation of the Najdorf defense, a counterplay designed to create flexibility. If she wanted a long battle, he would make it brutal. Piece by piece, they built their positions, pushing pawns, developing knights, and maneuvering their bishops with expert precision. Minutes passed, then half an hour. Neither of them spoke, but the tension in the air grew heavier. Ethan didn't need words to understand what was happening. The Xerians watching weren't just seeing a game. They were seeing a battle. To them, chess wasn't just about intellect. It was a symbol of dominance. They fought wars with ships and weapons, but today their queen was fighting with her mind, and she was enjoying it. Psychological warfare. Ethan glanced up at Excelvera. She was studying him, not just the board. Her golden eyes were sharp, observing his reactions, his expressions, even the way he breathed. She wasn't just playing chess. She was analyzing him. "You are not afraid," she finally said, moving her rook into position. Her voice was smooth, almost curious. Ethan gave a small shrug. "Should I be?" Excelvera tilted her head. "Most humans tremble before me. Most humans don't play chess for their freedom," Ethan replied. He moved his queen aggressively, attacking one of her knights. The room stirred. Some of the warriors exchanged looks. They expected him to play cautiously. Instead, he was challenging her directly. Excelvera studied the board, then gave a small smile. "Interesting," she murmured. Then she sacrificed her knight, ignoring his attack entirely. Ethan blinked. That was not an expected move. He quickly reanalyzed the board. That sacrifice wasn't random. It was bait. If he took it, she would counterattack hard. He smirked. "Trying to trap me already?" Excelvera leaned forward slightly. "The question is, do you have the courage to take the piece?" The way she said it sent a shiver down his spine. She wasn't talking about the game anymore. She was testing his mindset. Did he play it safe, or did he take risks? Ethan narrowed his eyes. If she thought she could intimidate him, she was wrong. He reached out and captured the knight. The moment he did, Excelvera's golden eyes gleamed. The real game had begun. The silent war. From that moment on, the match turned into a brutal, high-speed duel. Ethan threw everything he had into his attacks, using quick strikes and unpredictable plays. Era countered with precise, patient moves, setting up long-term traps that forced him into uncomfortable positions. Neither of them backed down. The Xerians around them watched in silence, their expressions slowly changing. At first, they had seen Ethan as a weak human, just a formality before their queen's victory. But now, some of them were frowning. Others were leaning forward, watching intently. They were starting to respect him. And HFY, she was smiling. Not a mocking smile, not a cruel smile, a genuine one. As if she was enjoying this battle more than anything in years. The turning point. The game had gone on for nearly an hour when Ethan realized something. The queen wasn't playing to win quickly. She was dragging this out. She wanted to see how far he could go. It was a battle of endurance now. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. His mind was working at maximum speed, calculating dozens of possible moves every second. One mistake, and he was done. He glanced up at the queen again. She was watching him closely, studying his exhaustion, measuring his willpower. She was testing not just his skill, but his heart. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. If she wanted a war, he'd give her one. He took a deep breath, then made his boldest move yet. The game was far from over. Ethan Voss was exhausted. The chess game had lasted over an hour, and his mind felt like it was on fire. He had played against some of the best grandmasters on Earth, but Queen HFY was different. She wasn't just thinking 5 or 10 moves ahead. She was testing him, pushing him, studying him, and worst of all, she was enjoying it. Across the stone table, HFY sat with perfect posture, her golden eyes focused on the board like a predator watching its prey. Unlike Ethan, she showed no signs of fatigue. Her violet fingers hovered over her rook for a moment. Then she moved it with elegant precision. Another smart move. Another trap. Ethan exhaled slowly. She's making me play her game. I need to change that. He glanced around the room. The Xerian warriors still watched in complete silence, their expressions unreadable. But Ethan could sense something different in the air. At the start of the game, they had been mocking him, underestimating him. Now, they were watching carefully. Some of them even looked impressed. Even though the queen had the advantage, Ethan was still fighting back. He was still standing his ground. And that mattered, because the Xerians didn't just respect victory. They respected strength. Mind games. Ethan studied the board. If he played too cautiously, HFY would squeeze him until he had no moves left. But if he played too aggressively, he might walk into one of her traps. So he did something else. He bluffed. He reached out and moved his queen. An extremely risky move. It looked like an attack, but in reality, it was bait. A gamble. If HFY fell for it, she would take the queen, thinking it was a mistake. If she saw through it, well, then he would have to find another way to survive. Silence filled the chamber. The warriors leaned in. They could feel the tension rising. HFY's eyes narrowed. She didn't move immediately. Instead, she lifted her gaze and looked at Ethan. The way she studied him sent a chill down his spine. He knew what she was doing. She wasn't just reading the board. She was reading him. She was trying to see if this was a real move or a trick. Her golden eyes locked onto his. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "Interesting," she murmured. Then, to Ethan's surprise, she ignored his queen entirely. Instead, she moved her knight, shifting the battle into a completely different position. Ethan felt his stomach drop. She saw through it. She didn't take the bait. That meant only one thing. She was toying with him. Breaking the mask. Ethan sat back, rubbing his forehead. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he muttered. HFY raised an eyebrow. "Should I not?" "You're not just playing to win," he said. You're playing to see how far I can go." The queen tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes gleaming. "Perhaps." Ethan leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the stone table. "So what happens if I actually win?" A ripple of quiet amusement passed through the Zyrian warriors. None of them believed he could do it. But Xelvera, she smiled. "If you win," she said, "then I will acknowledge your strength, and our empire will consider an alliance with humanity." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And if I lose?" Xelvera's smile widened. "Then you will become my husband." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Ethan could hear the slight murmurs from the Zyrian warriors. Some of them clearly supported the idea. Others looked irritated. Interesting. It wasn't just a test for Ethan. It was also a political move for Xelvera. Ethan didn't know much about Zyrian politics, but it was obvious that some of the warriors didn't like the idea of a human being their queen's consort. Which meant, win or lose, he was making enemies. Great. No pressure. A dangerous game. Ethan focused back on the board. The game was reaching a critical point. He was running out of pieces. He was running out of time. But there was one last move. A desperate, reckless gambit. It was the kind of move that could either save him or destroy him completely. His fingers hovered over the board. He could feel Xelvera's gaze watching him. She was waiting to see if he had the courage to risk it all. Ethan took a deep breath. Then, with steady hands, he made his move. A single, daring move that would decide everything. The moment of truth. The room fell into silence. Xelvera's golden eyes widened slightly. For the first time in the game, she hesitated. The Zyrian warriors stirred. Some of them whispered in their strange, guttural language. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. It all came down to this. Xelvera slowly reached for her next piece. The final battle was about to begin. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. His last move had been a calculated risk, a move that could either turn the game in his favor or lead to his defeat. Queen Xelvera stared at the board, her golden eyes narrowed. For the first time since the game began, she looked genuinely surprised. The Zyrian warriors around them murmured in their alien tongue. Some looked impressed. Others looked uneasy. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. He knew his position was still dangerous. He had lost too many pieces. He was running out of time. But his move had put Xelvera on the defensive, and that meant he still had a chance. A moment of silence. Xelvera didn't speak. She didn't move. She simply stared at the board, analyzing every possible outcome. The silence in the room was intense. Ethan could feel the eyes of every warrior on him. He knew what they were thinking. A human should not have lasted this long. But he had. And now, their queen had to make a choice. After what felt like an eternity, Xelvera finally reached out and moved her queen. A simple, quiet move. But Ethan instantly recognized it for what it was. A trap. Checkmate or defeat. Ethan's pulse quickened. Xelvera had just set up a perfect checkmate in 3 moves. If he didn't find a way out, the game was over. And that meant marriage. Ethan clenched his fists. No, not yet. He examined the board, searching for an escape. His mind raced, calculating every possible move, every possible defense. And then he saw it. A single impossible move. A move that no logical player would expect. A move that would either save him or doom him. Xelvera watched as Ethan slowly reached out and moved his knight. The moment his fingers left the piece, the room exploded into whispers. The warriors spoke rapidly, their voices filled with shock. Xelvera blinked. She stared at the board, then at Ethan. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsure. "You?" she began, then stopped herself. Ethan smirked. "Not what you expected." The queen exhaled softly. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It wasn't cruel. It was genuine amusement. You are unpredictable, she admitted. Ethan shrugged. That's kind of a human thing. Zelvera studied him for another long moment, then turned back to the board. She lifted her hand, paused. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, she tipped over her king. The room froze. The warriors stared in shock. Some of them gasped. Others whispered furiously. Because in Ziran culture, tipping your king was not just a loss. It was an act of respect. The queen's decision. Ethan sat back, breathing heavily. He had won. He had actually won. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He expected Zelvera to be angry, to demand a rematch, to challenge him in some other way. But instead, she simply smiled. A fascinating battle, she said softly. You have earned my respect, Ethan Voss. The warriors still looked stunned. Some of them clearly didn't like what had just happened. One of them, a broad-shouldered Zirian with dark purple scales, stepped forward. My queen, this is unacceptable. A human can it. Zelvera raised a single finger, and the warrior immediately fell silent. I made the rules, she said coolly. He won fairly. The warrior gritted his teeth but stepped back. Ethan exhaled, finally allowing himself to relax. So, does this mean I'm free to go? Zelvera's eyes gleamed. Perhaps. Ethan frowned. What do you mean, perhaps? The queen leaned forward slightly. You have proven your skill, your intelligence, your bravery. She smiled. And now I find myself curious about you. Ethan felt a sudden sense of danger. Curious how? He asked slowly. Zelvera rested her chin on her hand. Our agreement was simple. If you lost, you would become my husband. Ethan nodded. Right. But I won. Zelvera's smile widened. Yes, which means you have earned the right to choose. You may leave, or you may stay. Ethan blinked. Wait, you're saying I can stay? Zelvera's golden eyes locked onto his. You intrigue me, human, she said. Few warriors, even among my own kind, have the mind and spirit that you possess. She leaned back. I do not offer this lightly, but should you wish to remain, I will consider you an honored guest. Ethan hesitated. The smart thing to do was leave immediately. But some part of him was curious. About Zelvera, about her people, about what might happen next. He glanced around the chamber. Some of the warriors still looked angry. Others looked intrigued. And Zelvera herself. She was watching him intently, waiting. Ethan took a deep breath. And then he made his choice. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had won. Against all odds, he had defeated Queen Zelvera in a game of chess that had felt more like a battle of wills. He should have been celebrating, relieved to be free. But now, the queen was offering him something unexpected. Stay as my honored guest, Zelvera had said. Ethan studied her carefully. There was no trickery in her golden eyes, no sign that she was planning to trap him. But still, you're serious? Ethan asked, his voice cautious. Zelvera nodded, her expression unreadable. You won the game, Ethan Voss. That means you have the right to choose your path. Ethan exhaled slowly. He could walk away right now, return to his ship, leave this strange alien world, and never look back. But something held him in place. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just the queen's offer. It was the reaction of the Zirian warriors. Some of them looked angry. Some looked amused. But a few looked interested. Ethan wasn't just some random human anymore. He was the man who had challenged their queen and survived. He was respected. And in a warrior culture like this, respect was everything. Ethan met Zelvera's gaze. If I stay, what happens next? A flicker of amusement crossed her face. Then you will learn more about us, about our ways, our people, and perhaps we will learn more about you. Ethan hesitated for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. "I'll stay." A shocking decision. The chamber erupted. Some warriors growled in displeasure. Others whispered in shock. One of them, the broad-shouldered warrior who had protested earlier, stepped forward aggressively. "My queen, this is unacceptable," he snarled. "This human is an outsider. A game does not make him worthy of your time." Zelvera turned her golden gaze toward him. Her expression remained calm, but her voice was like steel. "Are you questioning my decision, General Karath?" The warrior, Karath, immediately stiffened. His muscles tensed, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might challenge the queen outright. But then, Karath took a slow breath, clenched his fists, and bowed his head slightly. "No, my queen. I would never question you." Zelvera smiled faintly. "Good. Then let us welcome our guest properly." She turned back to Ethan. "Come. You must see more of Zyria before you truly decide if you wish to stay." Ethan swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. Exploring a new world. The queen led Ethan through the grand halls of the palace. The architecture was strange yet beautiful, a mix of ancient stonework and advanced technology. Towering pillars stretched toward the high ceilings, glowing symbols carved into their surfaces. Strange, floating orbs provided soft, golden light, casting long shadows along the walls. Ethan tried to act casual, but his eyes darted around, taking in every detail. "You are quiet," Zelvera observed as they walked. "Are you nervous?" Ethan let out a small chuckle. "Well, I'm still processing the fact that I just beat an alien queen at chess and somehow ended up as her guest instead of her husband." Zelvera smirked. "Would you have preferred the latter?" Ethan coughed. "Let's not go down that road right now." The queen let out a soft laugh. "Very well." They stepped onto a balcony that overlooked the capital city of Zyria. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The city was massive, a perfect blend of nature and technology. Towering spires reached for the sky, glowing with an eerie purple light. Wide streets were lined with strange, alien trees whose leaves shimmered like liquid silver. In the distance, he saw ships flying effortlessly through the sky, moving with a grace that Earth's aircraft could only dream of. "This is incredible," he admitted. Zelvera nodded. "Zyria has stood for over 10,000 cycles. Our people value both strength and wisdom, those who have both rise to greatness." She turned toward him. "That is why your presence here is unique." Ethan frowned. "Because I won a game of chess." Zelvera's gaze sharpened. "Because you fought when others would have surrendered. Because you think differently." She took a step closer, her golden eyes locking onto his. "And because you interest me, Ethan Voss." A dangerous invitation. Ethan felt a flicker of unease. There was something about the way she said it, not as a compliment, but as a challenge. He wasn't just a guest here. He was being tested, and not just by the queen. The other Zyrian warriors were watching him carefully, some with curiosity, others with hostility. Ethan wasn't stupid. He knew that staying here meant walking a dangerous path. But there was something thrilling about it, too. A chance to learn, to prove himself, to do something no human had ever done before. Ethan took a deep breath and met Zelvera's gaze. "So, where do we start?" A slow smile spread across the queen's face. "Follow me, human," she said. "Your true test begins now." Ethan followed Queen Zelvera through the winding halls of the palace, his mind racing with questions. He had won the game. He had earned the queen's respect. Now he had agreed to stay, at least for a while. But what exactly had he signed up for? Zelvera led him into a large open courtyard. It was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. The ground was made of smooth, dark stone that reflected the alien sky above. Massive stone pillars surrounded the area, each carved with glowing Zyrian runes. A group of Zyrian warriors stood waiting. Their tall, scaled bodies gleamed under the soft golden light. Their eyes, sharp and watchful, locked onto Ethan the moment he stepped into the space. He swallowed. This doesn't look like a welcome party. Zelvera turned to him, a knowing smirk on her face. Before you can truly be considered an honored guest, you must prove yourself in another way. Ethan sighed. Let me guess. This is some kind of test. The queen nodded. A simple one. Strength, skill, and strategy are all valued in Xerian culture. You prove your mind is sharp. Now, we see if you can stand in the arena. The arena. Ethan glanced at the warriors, who were now stepping forward, each looking eager. One of them, a tall Xerian with deep purple scales and a scar across his jaw, crossed his arms. This human has no claws, no fangs. How can he fight? Zelvera tilted her head. Let us see. She gestured to Ethan. Do you accept the challenge? Ethan looked at her, then at the warriors, then back at her. Did he have a choice? Yeah, sure, he said, rolling his shoulders. Let's do this. The warriors chuckled. The scared one stepped forward. I am Karath. I will be your opponent. Ethan sighed. Of course it's the guy who already hates me. The battle begins. Ethan stood in the center of the courtyard, facing Karath. A crowd of Xerians had gathered, murmuring in excitement. Zelvera raised a hand. This is not a battle to the death, she declared. It is a test. The human need only last 3 minutes against Karath to prove himself worthy. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. 3 minutes. That's it. Then he saw Karath's smirk, and he realized just how long 3 minutes could be. The queen lowered her hand. Begin. Karath lunged. Ethan barely had time to react. He threw himself to the side as the warrior's massive fist swung past his head. The sheer force of the punch created a gust of wind. If that had hit him, Ethan didn't want to think about it. Move. Think. Stay alive. Karath came at him again, faster than Ethan expected. He dodged, barely avoiding another strike. The Xerian was stronger and faster. If Ethan tried to match him in raw power, he would lose instantly. So he did what he did best. He used his brain. Ethan faked left, then darted right, slipping just past Karath's reach. The warrior grunted in frustration. Too slow, big guy. Ethan taunted. Karath growled. He swung again. Ethan ducked, then rolled backward, putting distance between them. 1 minute down. The crowd murmured. Some of the Xerian warriors were watching with interest. Ethan smirked. What's wrong? You tired already? Karath's golden eyes flashed. This time, when he moved, he was faster. Ethan barely had time to react before Karath's tail swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard. Pain shot through his back. His vision blurred for a second. Karath loomed over him. You talk too much, human. He raised his foot to stomp down. Ethan rolled to the side just in time. The ground cracked where Karath's foot landed. Ethan scrambled back to his feet, his heart pounding. Okay, that was close. 2 minutes down. 1 to go. Karath charged. This time, Ethan didn't dodge. Instead, he did something crazy. He ran toward him. The Xerian warrior's eyes widened in surprise. At the last second, Ethan dropped low, sliding under Karath's legs. Before the warrior could turn, Ethan leaped onto his back. The crowd gasped. Ethan grabbed Karath's neck, locking his arms around him. How do you like that? Karath roared, trying to shake him off. But Ethan held on, using every ounce of strength he had. 5 seconds left. Karath stumbled. His movements became slower. Ethan grinned. I think I. The final bell rang. The match was over. Ethan released Karath and dropped to the ground, breathing hard. His body ached. His arms burned. But he had done it. He had survived. Respect earned. The courtyard was silent. Then, slowly, Zelvera stepped forward. Impressive, she said, her voice carrying through the space. You lasted 3 minutes against one of my strongest warriors. Karath scowled, but then he did something surprising. He extended a hand. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then took it. The Zirian pulled him up, giving a small nod. You are stronger than you look, human, Karath admitted. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. Zelvera's golden eyes gleamed. You have passed this test, Ethan Voss. Now, you truly belong here. Ethan let out a deep breath. He had come to Zyria as a prisoner. Now he was something else entirely, and he had a feeling his journey was only just beginning. Ethan stood in the center of the courtyard, still catching his breath. The battle with Karath had pushed him to his limits, but he had survived. More than that, he had earned respect. The Zyrian warriors, once doubtful, now looked at him differently. Some nodded in approval. Others whispered among themselves. And Queen Excelvera, she watched him with that same unreadable expression. You have proven yourself, Ethan Voss, she finally said, stepping forward. You are not just a lucky human who won a game. You are something more. Ethan smirked. Glad to hear it. So, what now? Am I officially part of your royal chess club, or do I have to fight a few more of your warriors first? Some of the Zirians chuckled. Even Karath let out a small grunt, almost like a laugh. Zelvera shook her head, amusement flickering in her golden eyes. No more battles for today, but your journey is far from over. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Meaning? The queen turned, motioning for him to follow. Come with me, she said. There is something you must see. The heart of Zyria. Ethan followed Excelvera through the palace, his body still sore from the fight. The halls were quieter now, the golden lights casting soft shadows as they walked. They descended a long spiral staircase that led deep underground. The air grew cooler. The walls changed from smooth stone to something older, rougher. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. Ethan stopped in his tracks. At the center of the room stood a huge floating crystal, glowing with swirling blue and purple energy. The light pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Zelvera turned to him. This is the core of Zyria, the heart of our people. It has powered our civilization for thousands of cycles. Ethan took a step closer, mesmerized. What is it? The queen's expression grew serious. It is ancient, even older than our recorded history. Some believe it is a gift from the stars. Others say it is alive, that it speaks to those who truly listen. Ethan frowned. And why are you showing this to me? Zelvera studied him for a long moment. Because it reacted to you. Ethan blinked. Wait, what? The queen gestured toward the crystal. When you won the game, when you fought in the arena, the core's energy shifted. It has never done that before, not for an outsider. Ethan's heart pounded. What does that mean? Zelvera's gaze was sharp. That is what we must find out. A choice to make. Ethan stared at the glowing crystal, his mind racing. This wasn't just about a game. It wasn't just about surviving. Something bigger was happening. Something he didn't fully understand. He turned to Zelvera. So, what happens now? Do I get superpowers or something? The queen smirked. That would be interesting. But no. For now, we observe. We learn. And you must decide where you stand. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had come to Zyria as a prisoner. Now he was something more. He had a choice. He could return to his old life, leave this world behind. Or he could stay. Stay and discover the truth. Stay and see what the future held. Ethan looked at Zelvera. The powerful queen who had once been his opponent was now something else entirely. An ally, a rival, a friend. Maybe all of the above. He grinned. Well, he said, crossing his arms, I've already beaten a queen and fought a giant lizard warrior. Might as well see what happens next. Zelvera's golden eyes gleamed. Then your true journey begins now. Ethan Voss.